Option cards. Option cards. Let's talk about them, shall we?
We shall.
The first thing we're going to talk about is the detour. And the reason we're talking about this one first is because we've already done the Cove section, and the detour is a Cove card hidden
in the
as
options
an option.
deck.
Yeah, it's kind of like a detour spy. It's like a Cove spy hiding amongst the options cards. So what we're going to talk about here is when a player gets this in his hand, it is still an options card. The moment I lay this down, it becomes a Cove card and then permanently on the board and is now handled like every other Cove card on the board. The way this will work is when I choose to, on my turn, unlike Cove cards that are played instantly, an option card can be played anytime I want to play an option card. Now,
during your play phase.
Don't interrupt me. Now, what I will do is on my turn, I'd say, you know what? I want to play this detour card. I have to follow the same rule as every other Cove. So I would take any Cove I wanted to, but it cannot be anchored down by another pawn, and it cannot be a cul-de-sac. But other than that, I could take any card. So let's say I want to take the beach. I pull that card out, put the detour card in, and then if I wanted, I could put this closer to the other player if I had something that's going to hurt them. Or I could have moved it closer to me or wherever I want to put this thing, as long as I follow the same rules, which is at least one flat side has to touch another flat side of a card, and no more than two corners of another corner can be touching your corner.
Yep.
Same exact rules. And that's pretty much how you play detour card. There's nothing to it.
Yep. Let's talk about defensive cards.
Let's talk.
So these cards can be played to counter another option card that another player plays.
Oh, okay. Well, other than the blaring red square around there, how else would we know that these are defensive cards, Brian?
Because they say defensive in the top in
That
the
is
top
brilliant.
of the card.
Absolutely brilliant.
It's like we thought this through.
Almost. At least we thought something through. Okay. Now, like Brian said, you could play these to counter an options card just played. Now, these are the only cards that can be played at a turn, and obviously you're playing it to rebut or cancel another player's option card.
To defend yourself, almost.
Oh my gosh. Almost
We should
like
have called them.
Wait, we did. Okay. So now something else to take note of. A defensive card can in fact cancel another defensive card because they are options cards. So if Brian plays a card that says, I'm gonna move you, Brian. No, you're not. I cancel that, and then I could cancel your cancel. So that is a possibility.
Cancelception.
Whoa. Now,
it's also important to note there's only 4 of those in the entire deck, so use them wisely.
Ooh, snap.
Ominous.
So now another last thing, I guess, and we can move on from defensive cards. Another last thing about these cards is you got to pay attention to the wording. Like everything else on these cards, wording can be very specific. In this case, you have an options card that's a defensive that cancels anybody's option card. That means it cancels it. That's like that card never existed. Then you'll have some that says, play this card to protect yourself from any options card just played. So let's say you just played a card that makes everybody lose cards. Well, I would play this. Brian still has to lose the cards, but I don't because I'm protecting myself from it. Now you have the infamous cat on a lamp. That cancels the card and therefore protects everyone at the table. And I think that about covers that very, very detailed thing.
That's defensive cards. All right. So another thing to point out is that stealing and discarding are totally different things.
I got arrested just last night for discarding.
I bet you did.
I was discarding TVs.
So this one that says everyone in a creek or beach, I believe. Yeah, if I was in the creek, I would have to discard, which is not the same as stealing.
Yeah, so if you have to discard out of your hand or discard out of your deck, and you want to play a card that stops people from stealing, or maybe you're in a spot that stops players from stealing, that is not the same thing. Speaking of, let's talk about this. Right here it says everyone in. Then we got cards that say all players, any players. This is important. Again, wording is important. Every player, all player, any player, this includes you too. So if both Brian and I are in a space and it says all players in that space, I'm a player too, whether I'm playing the card or not. If we're split up, it doesn't matter. When a player plays a card that says any player in that space, that is exactly what it means, any player in that space.
So you can hurt yourself with cards if you're not careful.
All players. The cards that you want specifically say you, if you. Words like you and your talk specifically about the player playing the card. For example, if you are sharing a space with another player, you could steal cards from them. Well, if Brian and I are sharing the same space and I play that down, we're not both going to steal from each other because we're both sharing the same space. It's if I played this card is talking to me on a personal level, even calling me by my first name. Jesse, if you're sharing a space with Brian, steal from him. Now, things like out of reach, if you are in the woods, again, Brian and I could both be in the woods, but all the cards that have you on them, they're all positives. I think most all the cards with anyone, everyone, and all are mostly negative. Again, if played in the wrong situation. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's how it is.
That may or may not be true.
But for the most part, again, all players is exactly that, including you. When it says you, it means the player playing the card, and the other players who are also affected by that don't get the benefit of that card.
Right.
I feel like I really knocked that one out the park.
Nailed it. Jesse, if I might,
And you may.
does every player and any player apply to movement as well?
I'm glad you asked that very unexpected question, Brian.
We didn't plan that at all.
There are certain cards that allow players to move other players and pawns and whatnot. Now, another thing to note, again, this is word specific. For example, you have cards that say move any pawn 2 spaces. And then you have things like move another player 2 or 4 spaces, move another player, move another player. Now, the difference is a pawn is anything on the board. Anything. This is a pawn, this is a pawn. It doesn't represent
The Ghost
anything.
of Benny is a pawn.
The boogeyman is a pawn.
Yeah.
These are all pawns, which means if I'm allowed to move any pawn, I can move me, I can move Brian, I can move any pawn that is on this board. If it says move another player, I specifically can move Brian. I can no longer move me because it says another player. I can also move Benny Harris. If I'm playing the Ghost of Benny Harris is a pawn, not a player. So just be word specific.
So you mean you didn't just mess that up? You actually thought that through, and that's why you named it like that?
You know what? I totally messed it up, but I had to get in my room for like 10 hours going, how can I fix this
How do I cover
problem?
this?
And I think that was a brilliant
Pawn
solution.
gate. Good job, buddy.
Thank you. Pawn, player, things you move.
Yeah. Cool.